to introduce the speaker today. I've been talking to you about him. I've told illustrations to you about my time that I served in Hammond, Indiana, and I worked for Hyles-Anderson College for 29 years. But with Dr. Ray Young, I actually served under him. I think the last 10 years, I believe, it might have been a little bit more than that, but the last 10 years for sure. And my supervisor was between Dr. Ray Young and me. And then there were some changes that took place there at the college, and I was afforded the opportunity to work directly for the president of the college. And I'm telling you, some of the best times of my life was serving under Dr. Ray Young. A very, a demanding man, okay? But that's a great thing, folks. A demanding man, but very gracious and very merciful, very kind, loved his employees, and we all knew that. This man here, he oozes character. Just take my word for it. He oozes character. He personifies integrity, self-discipline. You don't have to be around him long to see these things. And the greatest thing about his self-discipline, his integrity, his character, is that they first drive his holiness. You understand what I'm saying? It's not for you and I. He's not disciplined and has the integrity because he wants to impress you. Not at all. This man is though a very great man and one of my heroes. These things, these wonderful characteristics that he possesses, drives him first and foremost to God, and is a reason why he is such a holy, godly man. And so, having said that, I am very excited. I have been, you know this, to have him come and speak to us today and help us celebrate our 54th anniversary here at the church. And let me say this. He is a dear friend of mine, And if Dr. Ray Young is your friend, you have a friend for life. So join me in welcoming our guest this morning. Thank you.
Could I ask you to please open your Bible to the book of Proverbs, chapter 19, if you would, please. The book of Proverbs, chapter 19. And I'm going to confess to you right off the bat, I feel uncomfortable behind this pulpit. It was built for a man that's the normal height. It wasn't built for a little short guy like me. In fact, does anybody have a box I can stand on? You know what I mean? All right. But anyway, it's great to be with my dear friend, Brother Crockett, his wife, and then these your church. Congratulations on 54 years. Praise the Lord that God has used you. Some of you have been here most of that time, I understand, and many others have come through the years. And so congratulations that God has been using you here for all this time. I'm just glad to be back in the South. I grew up in Louisiana, but for the last 40 years, I've been in a foreign country called the North. And it's good to be back in the South again. And I just love being here. I grew up out in the country in Louisiana. I literally grew up on a dead-end dirt road. And literally, we had to open the cattle gap on the barbed wire fence to get from the dirt road to our house. Our house was in the middle of Mr. Lawler's pasture, and we had to shoo his cows out of the way to get to our house from the dirt road to my house. I grew up in the South, and when I was about 15 years of age, a bus captain came by my house from a church like this one, not nearly this big, about 60 people in that church. They had one bus, but that bus came by my house and took me to church. The first time I attended that church as a 15-year-old bus kid, I got saved. The second time I was baptized. The third time I went, I was called to preach. And God's been very good to me all these years. I'm thrilled that I get to be here with you today and help you celebrate this great occasion. Did I talk long enough for you to find Proverbs chapter 19? Are you there? I want to show you a verse this morning that has been a mystery to me. The Bible speaks about the mysteries of God. There are some things about God that I don't understand. And I'll be honest with you, I'm glad that I have a God that I can't understand. If I could understand everything there is to understand about God, well, then God would be no bigger than I am. And I need a God who's bigger than me that can help me. So this morning I'm going to show you one of those verses in the Bible that's been a mystery to me. Would you look at chapter 19, and we're going to read verse 23. Proverbs 19, verse 23 says, "The fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it is referring to the fear of the Lord. So that verse is saying, the fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath the fear of the Lord shall abide satisfied. He shall not be visited with evil." Now this verse seems to very clearly say, if I fear the Lord, I will not be visited with evil. But I'll have to be honest with you and tell you, there's been quite a few people, even some in the Bible, that seem to fear the Lord, but they were affected by the evil that somebody else did to them. Hold your place there in the book of Proverbs. We're going to come back there in just a moment. But I want to show you an example of someone I'm talking about. Hold your place there if you would, please, and turn to Genesis chapter 42. I want to show you an example of what I'm talking about someone who feared the Lord. Genesis chapter 42, and we're going to read just one verse, verse 18. Genesis 42, verse 18 says, "And Joseph said unto them the third day, This do and live, for I fear God." I mean, there it is, as clear as it can be in black and white. Joseph said, I fear God. Hey, but wasn't Joseph the fellow that was thrown into the pit by his brothers to starve to death? Sounds evil. Wasn't Joseph the one that was sold into slavery by his own brothers? Sounds evil. Wasn't Joseph the one that Potiphar's wife lied about? Hey, wasn't Joseph thrown into prison cast into prison when he wasn't even guilty? But I thought Proverbs 19:23 said, "The fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it shall not be visited with evil." Well, let me show you another example. Turn, if you would, this time to the book of Job. If you know where the book of Psalms is, right before Psalms, you'll find Job. Turn to Job chapter 1, if you would, please. Job chapter 1, I'd like to show you another example of what I'm talking about. Oh, by the way, let me say, maybe Joseph just said, I fear the Lord. Maybe that's the explanation. Maybe he said, I fear the Lord, but maybe he didn't really fear the Lord. Maybe that's the explanation. Or maybe Joseph meant it when he said, I fear the Lord, but maybe he didn't understand what it meant to fear the Lord. So maybe that's the explanation. Well, look at Job chapter 1, if you would, please. In Job chapter 1, verse 1, it says, "There was a man in the land of Uz." That's Uz, not Oz. We're not going to see the wizard. "There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil." Now would you please look down at verse 8. Verse 8 says, "And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Even God himself said, Job fears God." But you remember what happened to Job? You remember that day that Job was in his house, he was fasting and praying? Job had 10 children, and Job said, just in case one of my children may have said something in his heart against God, not even out loud, it just maybe in his heart, one of them might have said something against God. He said, I think I'll fast and pray for my 10 children. Job was in his house, he was fasting and praying, and one of his servants comes running through the door, and he says, Job, several of your servants and I, we were out in the field, and we were taking care of the livestock, and Job, the enemy came, and they attacked us. And Job, they killed every one of your servants. Except for me, I was the only one who escaped to come and tell you that they stole 1,000 of your oxen and 500 of your donkeys. And before that servant could get the words out of his mouth, a second servant comes running through the door, and he says, Job, several of your servants and I were in the field, and we were taking care of the sheep. And all of a sudden, Job, this fire began to fall from heaven. And when it did, Job, it killed every one of your servants. Except for me, I was the only one who escaped to come and tell you that that fire killed 7,000 of your sheep. And before he could get the words out of his mouth, a third servant runs through the door. He says, Job, several of your servants and I, we were in the field, and we were taking care of the camels, and an enemy came, a different one than before. And the enemy came and they attacked us, and Job, they killed every one of your servants. Except for me, I was the only one who escaped to come and tell you that the enemy stole 3,000 of your camels, and before he could get the words out of his mouth, a fourth servant comes stumbling through the door, disheveled, covered with dust, perspiring, red in the face, out of breath. And he says, Job, I really don't know how to tell you this. But several of your servants and I were at your oldest son's house. And we were serving a feast, and all 10 of your children were there. And Job, in the middle of the feast, a great wind came out of the wilderness. And it blew down all 4 corners of the house. And Job, when it did, it killed every one of your servants. Except for me, I was the only one who escaped to come and tell you that all 10 of your children are dead, all 10 of them. But I thought Proverbs 19:23 said, the fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it shall not be visited with evil. Hey, Noah feared the Lord. Remember what the Bible said about Noah? By faith, Noah, moved with fear, prepared an ark. But you remember what happened to Noah after the flood? One of his sons saw his nakedness, and God cursed his whole family. David, he feared the Lord. Remember what God said about David? He said, a man after mine own heart. But you remember what happened to David. David had a son named Amnon, and Amnon forced his own sister Tamar right there in the house. And David's other son, Absalom, got so mad at Amnon that he murdered him. And later Absalom got so mad at his father that he took the kingdom away from him. And when David's forces came back to regain the kingdom, he gave very clear instructions, nothing is to happen to my son Absalom. But David's own nephew Joab found Absalom in a defenseless position and murdered him in cold blood. John the Baptist feared the Lord. Remember what Jesus Christ said about John the Baptist? Among them that are born of women, there have not risen a greater than John the Baptist. You remember what happened to John the Baptist? He got his head cut off. I mean, if anything's evil. But I thought, well, wait a minute. How about Paul? Paul feared the Lord. Remember what Paul said about himself? He said, I have received stripes above measure. Paul said, they've beat me on my back with a whip so many times. Now the stripes, the scars crisscross my back to the point I can't even count them anymore. He said, in prisons more frequent. Paul said, when I go to town to preach, they don't put me on the 3rd floor of the Hampton Inn. They put me in the dungeon of the prison. He said, in prisons more frequent. He said, I spent more time in prison than out of prison. He said, in deaths oft. He said, often I've gone out to preach, and some other men went with me, and some of them got killed for preaching the gospel. He said, 5 times 40 stripes save 1, thrice beaten with rods, once stoned, thrice shipwrecked, in perils of water, in perils of robbers, in perils by my own countrymen, by the heathen, in the city, in the wilderness, in the sea, among false brethren. Paul said, I've suffered weariness, painfulness, hunger, thirst, cold, nakedness. But I thought Proverbs 19:23 said, the fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it shall not be visited with evil. Okay, well, what does it mean to fear the Lord? Now, would you go back to the book of Proverbs right quick? And this time, would you please go to chapter 8? I want to show you what the Bible says about what does it mean to fear the Lord. I'm in chapter 8, and I'm going to look at verse 13. Proverbs 8:13. I'm just going to read one quick little phrase from the beginning of that verse. Verse 13 says, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. Now, I don't know about you, but I certainly hate any evil that somebody else tries to do to me. Don't you? Don't you hate the evil that somebody else tries to do to you? In fact, I'm sure everybody in the whole world hates the evil that someone else tries to do to them. So if that is the evil that verse is talking about there, then everybody in the whole world fears the Lord. But we know that's not true. So what evil is it talking about? All right, would you turn now to chapter 16, Proverbs chapter 16. In Proverbs chapter 16, I want to read just one verse. I'm in Proverbs chapter 16, and I'm going to read verse 6. Verse 6 says, by mercy and truth iniquity is purged, and by the fear of the Lord men depart from evil. Okay, if I have to depart from the evil that someone else is trying to do to me in order to fear the Lord, well, there's sometimes I can't get away from the evil that someone else tries to do to me. You remember when Paul was in Iconium? He was preaching the gospel, and the people there in the town got together, and they were going to stone Paul, but Paul found out about it. So Paul did the same thing you and I would do. He left town, he left Iconium, he went down to Lystra, and he started preaching the gospel in Lystra. But the men in Iconium came down to Lystra and stirred up the men there in Lystra, and now the men from Iconium and the men from Lystra ganged up on him, and they stoned him, and they drug him outside the city and left him for dead. Paul tried to get away from the evil they were going to do to him by going to Lystra, but he couldn't get away from them. Would you go back to chapter 19, and would you look at verse 23 one more time? Verse 23 says, the fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it, the fear of the Lord, shall abide satisfied. He shall not be visited with evil. Oh, you know, I think I'm beginning to see it. What this verse means is, if I fear the Lord, then no evil will come to visit my heart. If I fear the Lord, no evil will come to visit my soul. If I fear the Lord, no evil will come to visit my mind. In other words, if I fear the Lord, no evil intentions will come into my heart so that I'm tempted to do evil to you. You know what one of my problems is? One of my problems, among many of them, one of my problems is I sometimes read the Bible from a selfish viewpoint. Sometimes I read the Bible looking for something that will bless me. Sometimes I read the Bible just looking for something that will protect me from you. You know, I want to use the Bible as a shield. God, I read my Bible this morning, so you got to protect me today from all those evil people out there. But sometimes when I read the Bible, I should look for something in the Bible that will bless you. Sometimes, if I ever get to be a good enough Christian, I ought to read my Bible once in a while trying to find something that will protect you from me instead of protecting me from you. And the Bible said there, if I feared the Lord, no evil will come in. Okay, here's what I do sometimes. Sometimes when I'm selfish, I want to think of the Bible like a good luck charm. You know, if I carry my Bible everywhere I go, if I keep a 4-leaf clover in my pocket, if I keep, are any of you old and willing to admit you're old enough to remember when we used to carry a rabbit's foot in her pocket. It was a good luck charm, you know. God, I got my good luck charm here. I got my New Testament in my coat pocket. I got my New Testament in the glove part of the car. I got my New Testament in my desk at work. And so, or you know, sometimes we want to treat the Bible like the bottle you find on the beach. You know, and you rub it long enough, and the genie comes out, and he gives you 3 wishes, and he protects you from all the bad guys. Or sometimes we want to act like, you know, if I carry my Bible long enough, maybe it'll keep all the vampires away. But, you know, the Bible is not just there to protect me from all the evil out there. The Bible's also there to protect all of you from the evil that I might let come visit my mind, that I might let come visit my heart, that I feel towards you. Amen. You know, the evil that's in my heart, that evil that I feel towards you or him or somebody else, that evil is going to do more to harm me than any evil that you could bring on me from without. Oh, okay. If that's the case, when the Bible says, if I fear the Lord, no evil will come visit me, then the Bible is a guaranteed protection for me from the worst evil there is, the evil that I let come visit my heart. Remember what Jesus said to the disciples? You don't need to turn there. But over in the book of Mark, Jesus said to the disciples, he said, do you not perceive, or don't you get it, that whatsoever thing from without entereth into the man, it cannot defile him, because it entereth not into his heart, but into his belly. But that which cometh out of the man, that defileth the man. For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, and he goes on to list several others. And then he says, all these evil things come from within and defile the man. You know, the evil that you try to do to me, it might make me feel uncomfortable. The evil that you do to me may cause me some pain. But the evil you do to me cannot destroy me. It cannot defile me. The only evil that can defile me, that can destroy me, is the evil that I let come visit my heart that I feel towards you. And the problem is, sometimes we enjoy the visit. Sometimes when that evil comes to visit my heart and I feel that evil towards you, I almost enjoy having it there. In fact, I let it stay so long it owes rent. Proverbs 19:23 said, the fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it shall abide satisfied. Do you know that you can be satisfied while somebody else tries to do evil to you? Have you ever tried to get somebody's goat? You say something to them, you're going to really get them, and they act like it just went right over their head. Like they didn't even get it. They just keep right on smiling. You know, there's sometimes when someone else is trying to do evil to you, you can be satisfied. But you cannot be satisfied while you try to do evil to somebody else. In fact, I'll go so far as to say you can't be satisfied as if you even let that evil intention come visit your heart. You know, sometimes when I don't do the evil to you that I want to do, it's not because I'm pious. It's not because I'm righteous. It's because I'm chicken. I'm afraid you got a brother bigger than me. Or I'm afraid if I do it, God will break my leg. Or worse than that, I'm afraid if I do it, somebody will tell Mama, and then I'll really be in trouble. Yeah, the Bible said, the fear of the Lord tendeth to life. Tendeth to life. We say a man tendeth to his garden. Or we say, I'm going to tend to that business this afternoon. What does it mean, the fear of the Lord tendeth to life? It means it puts life in order. It means it tidies up your life. To fear the Lord tidies up your life. Have any of you men ever tidied up your tool shed? Well, no, you've probably never done that. But have any of you ladies ever tidied up your kitchen cabinets? Okay, what happens? After a while, it needs to be done again, doesn't it? And I'm afraid that's what happens to us. We might fear the Lord for a little while and sort of tidy up our life. But if we're not careful, that evil tries to come back and revisit again. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil. Yes, hate the evil that I let come visit my own heart. By the fear of the Lord, men depart from evil. Yes, depart from that evil thought that I had in my mind that I felt towards you. Now, I see what time it is, and I understand what time you usually get out of church. And I know we're going to eat lunch right after this, so I'm as hungry as you are. So don't let this next statement scare you. But that was my introduction. Now I'm going to preach my sermon. And here's my sermon. Anytime we don't understand something about God, that's what it is. We don't understand. It's not that God was wrong or bad or evil or inconsistent or untruthful, unfair. It's not that God let us down. It's not that God didn't keep His word. The problem is we just didn't understand. And I remember the morning I was sitting in my office. Brother Crockett knows where my office is. We've worked together there in that office many, many, many times as dear friends. But I remember the morning I was sitting there in my office, and my desk, you know how my desk is sort of around the corner there, over at the end of the office there. It's a little before daylight that morning. My office is up on the second floor, has windows that overlooks our campus lake, and I was sitting there in my office a little before daylight. I was reading my Bible, and I came to Proverbs 19:23. And it said, the fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it shall not be visited with evil. And the first mistake I made was I said in my heart, not out loud, but almost, I said, if that verse is true. That was my first mistake. I said to God, if that verse is true, then explain Joseph. I said, if that verse is true, explain Job. I said, yeah, if that verse is true, then explain Paul the Apostle. And I thought I had God backed in the corner. And I said, okay, even if you can explain all the rest of them, explain John the Baptist. And God spoke to me. I mean, as clearly as you're hearing my voice right now, I heard God speak. No, not with my ears. Only Oral Roberts does that. But I heard God speak to my heart. And God said these words. I'm talking about that evil that you have in your heart. And God was so brazen, He even called the person's name. I had to get up out of my chair. I had to get down on my knees behind my desk. And with tears running down my cheeks, I had to confess my sin. I said, sin. No, I had never poked him in the nose. No, I had never said anything evil to him. In fact, I don't think I'd ever said anything evil about him. But I had to confess my sin of that evil I felt in my heart. And you know, Brother Crockett, I wish that I could stand up here this morning and say, bless God, from that moment to this, I have never again had a problem. But I can't say that. There's been too many times I had to go back in and tidy up my heart again. Is there anybody here this morning that would admit, not to me, but you would admit to God what He already knows? What I'm admitting? I'm admitting I had evil intentions in my heart. I had evil thoughts, feelings in my heart. And I'm not acting like that's the only time it ever happened. I'm admitting it's happened to me before. Is there anybody here this morning? I'm going to raise my hand. I don't want you to do that. But I'm going to raise my hand and testify. That's happened to me before. If I were to ask you to raise your hand, I'm not going to. If you were going to be honest, would you have to raise your hand? Has there ever been a time in your life when you let, maybe by accident, but it happened, you let some evil intentions or thoughts or feelings, some bitterness visit your mind, visit your heart towards somebody else? It might be there could be someone here this morning that once again, you need to go back in there and tidy up your heart. You need to get some of that bitterness out. Oh, you don't know what she said. Oh, you don't know what he did. Okay, I am not saying he didn't do it. I'm not saying she didn't say it. I'm not saying that they didn't hurt you. But life is not based on what others do to me. Life is based on how I react to what others do to me. Could I ask for every head to be bowed and every eye to be closed? Now, I've already raised my hand in front of a room full of witnesses this morning that there have been times, more than one, when some evil intentions visited my heart. And I have admitted that more times than one, I've had to come back to my heart and tidy it up again. In a few moments, the pianist is going to play an invitation number for us. But if you'd wait just a moment, I want to ask a question or two before you begin. In fact, if you don't mind, I'll point to you in a moment. And if you would, at that time is when I'd like you to begin the invitation song for us. Thank you for coming to do that. Who would say right now, with heads bowed and eyes closed, you're not confessing anything to Ray Young. I'm not a priest. But you would confess to God. If you want to indicate it by raising your hand so God knows for sure you're the one that's doing it, or if you just want to do it in your heart, that's up to you. But who would admit this morning, right now in your heart, I'll have to admit there have been some times I've had those feelings. I've had those thoughts. They visited my heart. Who would say that right now? My hand's up. Anybody else? Thank you. You may put your hands down. Many, many, many people raised their hand. Would anyone else say, I didn't raise my hand the first time. I didn't know for sure if I really wanted to or not. But just to make sure that God knows I'm admitting it, I think I'm going to raise my hand too. Anybody else, you'd say, that's happened to me before. Would you slip your hand up? God bless you. I see that hand and that hand and that hand and that hand and that one. Anybody else? Father, I pray for these that have raised their hands this morning, for others who maybe should have, and maybe felt exactly the same way in their heart, but they just chose to keep that between you and them, and that's fine. But I pray for every one of us this morning that we'll be willing to admit to you that we've had some times when we needed to tidy up our heart, tend to life, fear the Lord by getting that evil intention out, getting that bitterness out. I pray that maybe this morning, right here in this service, there'll be some of us that'll take care of that again right here this morning, even at this altar. With heads bowed and eyes closed, before the piano begins to play, could I ask you to stand right now? Whether you raised your hand or not, if it's convenient for you, would you stand right now and join all the rest of us by standing? In just a moment, I'm going to point the pianist, and when I do, when she hits that very first note, would you do this? Would you be willing to say to God, I was sincere? A moment ago when I raised my hand and said, yes, there have been some times in my life when evil intentions visited my heart, and I'm willing to tidy up my heart and get that out. I'm willing to work on it again. Or there may be somebody here this morning that said, Brother Young, honestly, as far as I know right this moment, I don't have any of those feelings, but I guarantee you there is a good possibility they'll come knocking on your door again sometime in the future. And you might want to get ready for that this morning.